So let's talk about a name that really none of us are likely to forget. Thomas Matthew Crooks. He's the man who was on that rooftop, the man who tried to assassinate a former president. But the real story here, the one we're going to dig into, is who was this person? It's a really complex and frankly disturbing puzzle that forces us to look way past the headlines.
So who was the man behind this attack? Was he some kind of political fanatic, a deeply troubled loner, maybe even a pawn in a bigger game? The thing is, investigators have dug up a ton of information, but the man himself, he's like a ghost. His reasons are just not there.
All right, so let's start with this first section. To really get a handle on Thomas Crooks, you have to understand this massive contradiction at the heart of his life. It's like he was living two completely separate lives, one that everybody saw, and another that, well, nobody saw at all. Okay, so on the one hand, you have this public image, and it's pretty impressive. We're talking a 1530 SAT score. That's 99th percentile stuff. His professors called him a star student. And get this, he designed and 3D printed a custom Braille chessboard for his mom, who's visually impaired. I mean, that's the picture everyone saw, right? A gifted, really caring young man. But then there's the other side, a really deep, kind of unnerving isolation. We have this quote from a childhood friend who says, "I had known him since kindergarten, but I was never invited into his house." Think about that for a second. That's not just being shy, that's a wall. A huge wall he built between himself and, well, everyone, for his entire life. And this is where those two worlds just completely collide. You've got the public guy, academically gifted, a whiz in engineering, loved cooking with his family. And then you have the private reality. A kid who literally never had friends over, always ate alone, and was apparently bullied at school. Both of these things are true. And that's the core paradox we're looking at. You know, his isolation got so bad, so noticeable, that some of his classmates apparently had a nickname for him. And it's a really chilling one. They called him the school shooter. So long before any of this happened, long before he ever picked up a real weapon, the people around him could already sense something was off. Something deeply unsettling about how detached he was. Okay, so now we're moving into the next part of this story. Because that isolation we've been talking about, it wasn't just passive. Something was happening under the surface. It was hardening, turning into a secret, very methodical plan. A plan that played out over months, completely hidden from everyone. Just look at this number. Over 40. That's how many times Crooks went to his local rifle range in just 11 months. That's almost once a week. You know, this isn't a casual hobby. This is training, a regimen. He was systematically, patiently, getting very, very good at using a rifle. And you can see how the plan just escalates, step by step. It all starts in the summer of 2023. He buys a rifle, joins a gun club. Then, by January 2024, he's moved on. He's ordering stuff to make bombs, like nitromethane, and he starts getting serious about hiding his online activity. Then, the plan goes from the computer to the real world. By July 7th, he's doing reconnaissance on the ground at the rally location. And on the day of the attack itself, a drone goes up for one last look. And the way he covered his tracks, it was incredibly disciplined. From January 2024 on, almost everything he did online was hidden behind a VPN. He used encrypted email to buy the bomb-making materials. And his search history, wow, it's like a direct window into his thinking. He's looking up stuff like, how far away was Oswald from Kennedy? And here's a key detail. He wasn't just focused on one side. He was researching both the DNC and the RNC conventions. So all of this planning, all of this secrecy, it all comes to a head on July 13th. And this is where his meticulous, careful plan runs right into what a Senate committee would later call a series of unacceptable failures in security. Let's walk through the timeline of the attack itself. At 3:51 p.m., his drone goes up. It's in the air for 12 minutes, surveying the whole layout. Then, around 5 p.m., local police actually spot him. He's using a rangefinder, and they note he's acting suspiciously. But still, just after 6 p.m., he manages to climb onto the roof of a totally unguarded building. And at 6:11 p.m., he fires 8 shots. It was all over in seconds before a Secret Service sniper shot him.
So, of course, the big question on everyone's mind was, how on earth did this happen? Well, the official verdict from a Senate committee report was absolutely damning. They didn't just point to a determined attacker. They pointed to a security plan that was, in their words, riddled with unacceptable failures. And the failures were, well, they were critical. First off, the building he used for his sniper's perch, completely unguarded. There was supposed to be farm equipment there to block the line of sight. It never got put in place. And maybe the worst part, local police did report Crooks to the Secret Service, but that message got garbled, it was fragmented, and it never made it to the agents on the ground. And all this happened after the Secret Service had apparently denied multiple requests for more resources for this very event. All right, so after the attack, the FBI kicks off this massive investigation. I mean, they dug into every single corner of his life. But what they found, and maybe more importantly what they didn't find, just made the whole thing even more mysterious. And this is probably the single most important thing to come out of the entire investigation. The FBI searched his house, his car, his computers, his encrypted messages, everything, and they found nothing. No manifesto, no suicide note, no video, zero. Nothing to explain why. He left behind this incredibly detailed trail of how he did it, but absolutely no trace of why. So if you were hoping to find a simple political motive here, you're out of luck. It's a total puzzle. Check this out. He was a registered Republican, but he also donated $15 to a progressive PAC. He wrote essays in college that were critical of Trump's policies, and also essays that were critical of Biden's policies. And remember, he searched for info on both DNC and RNC events. For investigators, the only thing they could conclude was that his political profile was just a total mess. Ambiguous. The forensic evidence backs all this up. It confirmed he was acting alone, no accomplices, no foreign government telling him what to do. They found he'd been researching nitromethane explosives way back in 2019. They also found a partially built bomb in his bedroom, which shows just how far along he was. They did find some anti-Semitic comments online that might have been linked to him, but they could never authenticate them. Another dead end.
So that brings us to the final section. After all the digging, after all the evidence, we're left with that one huge, unanswered question. Why?
Since he left nothing behind, all we really have is speculation. Experts, criminologists, they've kind of landed on 3 main potential theories. And these are just theories. First, personal grievance. Was he lashing out because he felt so isolated and bullied? Second, a desire for infamy. Was this just a way to make sure his name was never forgotten? Or third, was this the result of a serious, undiagnosed mental health crisis?
And a lot of experts who study this stuff seem to agree on the general direction. There's this quote from a former FBI agent, John Nance, who said it perfectly. He doesn't fit the typical profile of a politically motivated domestic extremist. This is a loner. The evidence just keeps pointing away from politics and towards something deeply personal and internal.
So in the end, we might just have to live with a really unsettling conclusion. The general consensus among people who have looked at all the evidence is that because Crooks didn't leave a note or anything explaining himself, his real motive, well, it may never be known. It's a mystery that might have died with him on that rooftop.
When you step back, the case of Thomas Crooks is just deeply disturbing. This wasn't about some grand ideology or a big conspiracy. It was one person whose path to violence was planned down to the smallest detail, but whose reasons for doing it are a complete and total blank. And that really leaves us with a final, very difficult question to chew on. When an act of violence seems to have no clear reason, how do we even begin to prevent it?